Hello, I'm coming live to you tonight from Bali. I'm Martina Hughes, your love, intimacy and relationship mentor. I created Tantric Blossoming 13 years ago to support men and women to have more empowering experiences around love, intimacy and relationships, knowing that people long for and desire greater connection, deeper intimacy, and more meaning in their connections, but often struggle with how to go to those places. So I'm on holiday in Bali. I'm a little bit tired tonight. I just arrived this afternoon and we had a very early start out of Melbourne this morning. So I'm going to make this a short one tonight. Trust is a huge topic in relationships, so I could talk for hours about it, but I'll keep this one to about 20 minutes this evening. Thank you to all the people joining me at the moment. It's awesome to see some familiar faces and some new faces. Hi Shelley, hi Mary, hi Robert. Feel free to say hello in the chat box so I know who's there. Hi Con. So the topic of trust is a really critical one in our relationships. Hi Michelle, lovely to see you're joining me. And I'll start with a personal story because it's actually through personal stories that you can have the opportunity to see where I've journeyed around this topic and what's changed in my life as a result. So the thing that happened for me as a young woman, and even really up until this relationship that I'm in now with Rod, is that I would always be looking for reasons to not trust the other person. So whenever I was connecting with a man, whenever I was entering more deeply into a relationship, I would be looking to see, where is it that he's let me down? Where is it that he will let me down in the future? How do I know that this man how do I know he's trustworthy? But in the asking of that question, I would constantly be looking for all the reasons why I shouldn't trust him. How many of you have done that? Maybe just write, yes, I can relate, or me too into the chat box. If you relate to looking for the reasons to not trust somebody. I call it the hypervigilant voice in me. It's the part of me that is always on the lookout. It's the part of me that will always be doubtful and second guessing. The part of me that will anticipate in advance that I will be disappointed and let down. Yeah, Shelley says she knows that voice. Yeah, I think it's a strong one for a lot of us. And it often goes back to our childhood relationships because in one way or another, because our parents are human, at some point they will have let us down. And when our parents let us down, and they're our significant caregivers, they're the people that we're dependent on. And so when the people that we're dependent on let us down when we're children, then that sets up this lifelong dynamic of looking around to see who will be the next person to let me down, who will be the next person to disappoint me. And so in relationships, whenever we're looking to see how, where, when the other person is going to disappoint us, we will see more of that behavior. Whatever we look for, we will find. There's a tendency as humans to look for evidence to back up whatever it is that we're thinking or believing. So whilst ever I'm believing that I can't trust men, I will find more and more and more reasons to not trust men. Those reasons will just kind of be hitting me in the face. But what if I flipped that? What if I started from the premise of I can trust a man? I can tell you with absolute certainty, if you turn that around and start to believe that you can trust a man, you will actually find more and more reasons to trust him and to trust men generally. I know there's often a lot of negative dialogue about the reasons why we can't trust men, or the reasons that men are unsafe, or the hurtful things that men have done to us as women. And that very much keeps this energy alive of searching for what it is that men have done wrong and how they're going to hurt us. And whilst ever we focus on that particular dialogue, we attract more of that energy into our lives. And so one thing I recognized in myself, and this happened in my relationship with Rod, where I could see myself looking for reasons to not trust him. And when I talk about trust in this context, I don't just mean trust in terms of fidelity and faithfulness. I mean trusting a man with the most vulnerable parts of me, trusting a man to support me, to back me, to be right by my side no matter what happens. And so I noticed that this distrusting part of me didn't believe that a man would support me, didn't believe that a man would have my back. And so I also had this sense that I didn't trust myself. And of course I didn't trust myself because in the past I'd stayed in relationships too long. I'd stayed in relationships when there had been some unhealthy patterns, some unhealthy behaviours playing out. Christine Jeffries has just said, why can't I play this? If you can see me, if you can hear what I'm saying, just type yes so I know that there are people tuned in. I'm not sure what's happening for you, Christine, but if you're unable to pick it up now, you will be able to pick up the recorded version. So what I noticed was, that I didn't trust myself because I'd stayed in relationships past the healthy exit date. I'd stayed in relationships where there were red flags and where I should have walked away and had my own back. Okay, it seems like people are seeing and hearing. Thank you for your yeses and your comments. It's great to feel you and see you there. Still getting used to this Facebook Live medium. Peter's here, Trina as well. Thank you. So for me, one of the key things that happened was I needed to rebuild my trust in myself. I needed to know that I would have my own back. And so there was a period where Rod and I were going through some disagreements and challenges with each other. And there was a circular nature to our arguments that was unhealthy and unsupportive and getting us nowhere. And so at that time, I put down some really firm boundaries and I said, this is not okay. Like, this is not working for me. It doesn't feel good and I can't continue like this. For me, there was something in putting down that really firm boundary that supported me to see I could have my own back and that I could take responsibility around what I wanted in a relationship and what would be supportive for me to be in a continuing relationship. As a result of me going to that place, Rod actually had some significant breakthroughs of his own. And in him having some more significant breakthroughs and seeing his part in that dynamic was that then I was able to have an even deeper and closer look at this part of me that didn't want to trust a man. This really strongly hypervigilant voice in me that was still keeping him at arm's length. Yes, I love you and I want to create a life with you, but just stay over there so that I know I'm safe. And in that dynamic where there's kind of this push and pull alive, like pulling him close to me, keeping him a little bit at arm's length, being like this in our dynamic. So it meant that I was never going as deeply into our emotional connection. I was never going as deeply into our sexual union as what I desired. But as soon as I recognized that I needed to trust myself and that there was a place for me to trust Rod more deeply and to actually look for the reasons I can trust him, then our relationship deepened significantly. Because then I felt safe. Then I had that sense of knowing my own masculine energy, but also not having to overly exercise my masculine energy. Often the way I see it is that my masculine energy is like this solid pole that runs down the back of my body that's like, I'm here and I've got you and I'm not going anywhere. And then my feminine energy can flow and open and move around that pole. So trusting that strong masculine part in me actually supported me to be able to trust Rod and trust men to an even deeper level in relationships. And so then there was space for more of my vulnerability. And in that way, in trusting a man, what I found was that in trusting Rod, he felt so much more empowered in his masculine energy. He felt so much more able to serve me, to meet me, to lead our relationship, and to be there in all the ways that I was longing for him to be there, as well as in all the ways that he was longing to be there, in all the ways that he was longing to show up for me. So that's really the personal nature of this share for me tonight, is how this dynamic of trust has played out between Rod and I. And I really feel and notice nowadays how the more I trust him to make decisions for us, the more I trust him to make decisions for me, the more I trust him to have my own back, the stronger we both are, individually and together. And there's a sense of me no longer having to carry my whole weight, me no longer having to just have it all together and be this self-contained person that I would have been in past relationships. So if you have any specific questions about how trust plays out for you in a relationship, how you can deepen your own capacity for trust, feel free to type your questions into the chat box. And I'd love to answer a couple of questions. As I said, I am going to keep it short tonight because I need to go and rest, and I know it's a little bit later now back in Australia as well. Devaji says, how long did the warring go for? This particular situation between Rod and I that I was referring to lasted for around a week. So there was quite an intensity of disagreement between us that was active for a week or so. And so it reached a threshold for me where I needed to say, these are my boundaries around our communication. Emily says, what sorts of things would you look for to trust on? Sure. So look at whether a man follows through on his word. Look at whether a man honors his word. Look at what's of value to a man. Because when you know what is of value to him, they will be the areas where he shows up very strongly. So, for example, in our relationship, I knew that relationship was very important to Rod, and I could see that he was absolutely always there for me. If I was saying to him, I need you, I need support, he was there. He was consistent in the way he showed up. So that was one thing that I could build trust on. I also noticed that, work, providing an income, taking care of his family is a really high value for Rod. And I noticed that he always delivered on those things. So I noticed that if he offered somebody support, he would always follow through on that support. So what are the things that the man in your life is saying? One of the important things for me, which many of you have probably heard before, is that growth is a critical part of my life and a critical part of our relationship together. And so when we were stuck in a bit of a cycle of disagreements, I felt like we weren't growing and that we actually weren't supporting each other's growth. But when I took a healthy stand for me, then I noticed that Rod's growth actually propelled forward as well. So that's part of the ways in which we can inspire each other. But if you're not able to trust a man, have a look, first of all, to say, where am I not trusting myself? What are the past stories that I run that either come from my parents or past relationships about being able to or not able to trust people? How can I unpack and unravel those stories? And this man in front of me, what are the ways in which he is trustworthy? What are the ways in which I see and feel him supporting me? And how can I lean more fully into that? I hope that helps your question, Emily. And if anybody else has a question, I have a few minutes. We can probably take one more question. Even sharing the parts of your feeling nature that you ordinarily keep at bay. I know that in a world where we're meant to be able to work it out ourselves, we often keep the prickly and uncomfortable feelings separate from our partners. But even just showing up and saying, this is really hard for me to talk about. It's really difficult for me to share. Even saying something like that, you will see the quality of a person, whether they lean in, whether they say to you, yeah, I can understand how that's hard to share, and I'm here for you. Okay, it looks like we might have run out of questions for tonight, but I'm happy to talk about trust some more on a future Facebook Live. I will be joining you again next Monday night, live from Bali. Here we go. Peter says, what was it like for Rod when you allowed him to do more things like make the decisions? He felt really, really good. It was Trina asking that question. Rod loved it. Energetically, emotionally, it's like he expanded in whole new ways. There was so much more of me available, and it actually inspired for Rod to be so much more available. So he felt good about making more decisions, and I felt good because I make heaps of decisions in my business every day, and it was actually a real relief to have somebody making some decisions for me. And some of you may have heard me speak before about data. The more data we give men, the better decisions they will make for us. And so Rod felt really empowered. He also enjoyed how much I showed my gratitude and appreciation to him. If a man is carrying responsibility in his life and carrying it like it's a burden without being nourished by the feminine, it can feel heavy and too much. But when a man feels that responsibility and he feels loved and he feels the feminine nourishment come back to him as a result of that responsibility, that feels amazing for him. So never, ever, ever underestimate the power of gratitude, appreciation, and really nourishing a man with your feminine energy, letting him know how good it feels to be supported by him. One of my kind of subcategories of trust was this sense of not believing that a man would have my back. But as soon as I started believing that Rod would have my back, I started seeing all the ways in which he actually did have my back, and then acknowledging him for that. And he's like, Yeah, of course I've got your back. Of course I do. I'm here for that. So I hope that answers your question, Trina. Robert says, enjoy your break in Bali. Thank you. Devajis, thank you so much for your beauty and vulnerability. Enjoy your holiday. Lisa says, how does the reciprocal of trust show up for you from the woman to the man? So I think what Lisa's asking about, and clarify if I'm wrong, but asking about when a man trusts a woman. I know that when I'm trusted, when I feel Rod trusting me, then I actually feel more free. If I feel him doubting me, if I feel him watching me or waiting for me to make a mistake, then I feel a little bit cornered and trapped. And I actually know that the same works for him as well, that if I'm not trusting him, he feels trapped. And so, yeah, when a man trusts me, there's that sense that who I am is accepted, who I am is approved, who I am is loved. And it can be quite common in our relationships to try and change each other. But when we don't trust each other, when we don't respect each other, when we're trying to change each other, there's always a discord that sits in the energy between you and a partner. So it's incredibly powerful when there is that trust present in both directions. So I hope that helps your question, Lisa. And I'm going to wind up on that note. I've had a very early start in Melbourne, and now I'm in Bali. I want to go and catch a little bit of the warm evening air before I go to bed. But thank you so much to everybody who's joined me, and I'll see you again for Monday Night Live next week. And if you have any questions or topics, please do send any questions or topics to me if you'd like me to include them in a future Monday Night Live. Good night.